What is going on, everyone? Oh man, there has been so much drama in comic book grading in the last year. We've got some new stuff that recently came out. There have been some videos done by Swaggle Comics as well on this. But what we're going to do is we are going to go over all the different comic book craziness that has happened over the last year. It's possible I'll miss something. There's been a lot. And then we will end with the most recent situation going on between CBCS and kind of PSA. But there's some crazy stuff going on. There's some crazy stuff that's gone on over the last year. Let's go over all of this, talk about a little bit. I'll give my opinion on the different things that have happened. And yeah, just get a nice little overview of everything that's been going on with comic book grading over the last year. All right, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So like I said in the intro, there has been a lot of craziness in comic book grading over the last year. Now, I know some of you that watch this channel, you hate grading anyway. And, for you will probably just watch this and be like, see, this is why you shouldn't grade, only buy raw, all that kind of stuff. And you'll see in the back up there for this video, I specifically just put raw books up there just so, I maybe don't have somebody coming at me for having like CGC books behind me in this video. We got some cool stuff. I have some cool raw books too. Like I buy raw books, I buy graded books. I like them both. But, I've got the Astonishing 30, like my opinion, the best Atlas cover. Action Comics #4, fourth appearance of Superman. Got a Strange Worlds #4, one of the best Wally Wood covers, in my opinion, that he did. So just, raw books are fine too. It's just, I do like grading. It's pretty clear. I have a lot of graded books. I buy and sell graded books. I buy and sell raw books. But I do like grading. I do like what it adds to the hobby, even though I know some people don't like that. But it also adds some drama. So let's start getting into this. Now we're going to start with a year ago. And so basically a year ago, and this isn't really drama, but it's something that kicked off just about a year ago. This is around September to October of 2023. CBCS finally put out a new label. And this is something that people have been clamoring for years. Now, they did kind of have a new label a few years ago, but it was same similar design. Now, personally, I actually like their prior label more, but it doesn't really matter because I'm not a person that generally buys CBCS books. I've talked about it before. I talked about why they're just, from my experience as a seller and as somebody that watches a lot of sales, they're harder to sell. They tend to sell for less. But lots of people were saying like, oh, if they only change their label, that'll be the difference maker. So they changed their label and their books still sell for less. I've watched it for the last year. I've seen these books come up for sale. They still generally sell for less, even with the new labels. I'm not a huge fan of this design. I don't really like the this little like chevron thing in the corner. It feels like late 90s to me, but it's fine. The label's fine, but it didn't change anything. It was, the thing that everybody said was going to change everything with CBCS didn't really change anything. All right. So that was the first thing about a year ago. That's my take on that label. Next thing, December 2023. We had this bomb that dropped on the comic book collecting hobby. This is from the 99 newsstand, Manu, where he put out this post where this kicked off everything with the CGC swap, scam, drama, everything with it. And so where basically someone was taking books and swapping lower grade books into higher grade cases and then selling them, making a profit, and just doing it over and over and over again. This kicked off lots of videos. I made some videos. Swaggle House made some videos. Other people made videos. Lots of people made videos, talked about it for months. And really nobody talks about it anymore. It's one of those things that, and we said this back when this was all happening, is that, it's like with anything with news. It's just people lose interest after a bit. Like I actually had people criticizing me in videos I was doing that they're like, don't talk about this anymore. We don't want to hear about it anymore. It's old news. But, it's like, all right, like if that's how everybody feels, like that's kind of why this stuff just goes away and people stop talking about it and gets forgotten. But this did go on for quite a few months. Right after this, we had CGC put out this statement. This was in January, where we had, they actually commented on the tampering. They had this big list here. If you go down, here's all the questions up, but they had this big list. We know that this person did some other ones where they didn't send them back in, so they wouldn't be on this list. So there are potentially still books out there. We have no idea how many. A lot of us kind of hoped that the lawsuit that resulted from this would maybe have given some more clarity to this, but everything seems to have been settled outside of court, and so we didn't really get any answer to those questions. But you can see here, a lot of these still don't have strikes through them. If the book had been sent back to CGC and they compensated the person, basically took it off the market, whatever they do with them once they get it, they got a strike through them. And you can see there are some. Let's find some. Yeah, there are some of these. They have strikes through here. It's through the number, but a lot of them, still don't, which means a lot of those are likely still out there. And so if you do have them, if you do have these numbers, like, just make sure you go check this out. From what I saw, they were paying out pretty well with respect to the market value, even a little above from what some people had reached out to me about. So, I mean, it seems like it's worthwhile. You could just send it in, get your money, and then go buy another copy if you want another copy. But there are quite a few that are still out there. So just be aware of that is still a risk. The big ones were like Amazing Spider-Man 194, Amazing Spider-Man 300, X-Men 266, New Mutants 98. Like, those are the books, like the kind of like the Copper Age 9/8 type books into a little bit into modern 9/8 books. Those are the ones you want to keep an eye out for. All right, so then we had Paul Lesko, who just made an appearance on Swagglehouse Comics to talk about the most current thing that's going on. He made these posts about the lawsuit that kicked off because of this. This is where CGC was suing Zanello and Riva for basically reholdering these books and swapping in books and damaging their brand. And at least from what I understand, I believe this has all been settled out of court now. I think it's all done. We're not going to hear anything else really about it. A lot of us wanted to hear about it. We're not going to get any more. And it's just it's over. And just, that's what I'm saying, like, keep an eye out for those other books still. Because there is still that risk that you could accidentally purchase one of those books that had been swapped out. But even if you do, you can send it to CGC and you can get your money and all that. Then, soon after that, we had a second scam. This was in January to February timeframe of 2024 of this year, where it was found out that Brandon and Ayana Terrazas, employees at CGC, were stealing books, printing some of their own labels, all kinds of stuff. So this was another thing, and then I believe this one has also been settled outside of court. I haven't heard any updates on this for a while. So that side of the CGC drama stuff is largely done. People generally don't talk about it anymore. It's strange that the video that I did about this back in December has been getting a lot of views over the last month, like as many views as one of my normal videos that I put out just in the last month. So either YouTube is sharing it with people more, or there's interest again in it, maybe just because of other things that have been going on with CGC and the bending, which we'll get to. But yeah, some people are getting, pushed towards those videos again. So maybe that will remind people of what's going on. But just be aware that this stuff did happen early this year. We haven't really it doesn't feel like we've gotten a resolution from CGC on the cases yet. A lot of us, that's what we really hope to have happen, that we wanted to have some type of new protection on the cases that would prevent this from occurring. So there's some rumors that maybe they've made some changes, but there's nothing that they've told anybody. I mean, obviously they don't want to tell people how to potentially break into the cases again, but it's nothing obvious that was done to make the cases more tamper-proof or tamper-resistant. And so all of us, I think, would really like to have that information, if, at least that they've done something, but haven't really got anything from that yet. But yeah, so we had these two lawsuits. Then next thing that happened, the 9/9s all started. The CGC 9/9s. Now there's all kinds of, a lot of people like to think that it's like this was a result of the CGC scam stuff, that like, trying to turn people's heads towards something else, which is, it's always possible. That could be what it is. But it does appear that we have been getting some more 9/9s for these a little bit more rare books, these vintage books. This is the first 9/9 ever for a giant size X-Men #1, and sold for a bunch of money, which we will talk about a little bit later, but sold for a bunch of money on Comic Connect. Soon after this book popped up, we then had this Wolverine 10-0. Now that's the one that got really interesting with the 9.9s, because that submission, it wasn't just the 10-0. There were a bunch of 9.9s that also got returned in that submission. That was where what we saw was, it seemed like if you sent in a bunch of the same book, like high grade copies together, that your likelihood of getting a 9.9 appears to be higher. There's no definitive proof on that or anything, but it's what it came across as with that submission. And we've seen it with other submissions as well, as I've been tracking this stuff, where we saw, a whole bunch of Spider-Man 1 silver copies, that get sent in, and a whole bunch of 9.9s came back with it, and a few other cases as well. And so it does appear that there might be, some more 9.9s coming out. Now, the question is, are they grading differently, or was CGC not grading them correctly before, and they were just kind of ignoring the 9.9s, just giving them 9.8s? That is also bad, because then it means that you weren't getting the grade you should have gotten. But it's one or the other. Either they're giving more 9.9s now, or because they've maybe changed their standards, which I don't really think that's what it is, or they weren't looking for them before and now they started looking for them again, maybe because volume has reduced at CGC for submissions. And I think that's more likely. And it's not a great look, but that does seem like what it is. But, who knows? Can't say for sure. All right. So then we had this happen. Now, this one didn't really get picked up until about a month and a half ago. This is the whole Bend Gate situation, or Banana Gate. This was, is anyone else getting books back with warped inner wells? This topic was created on May 14th. So I'm kind of doing everything in order, that has happened. So May 14th, we had Banana Gate kick off, and didn't get a lot of traction at first. Then there were some Facebook posts, some YouTube videos made about this. And then it became pretty clear that something was going on, that you have these cases where the comics are basically flexing inside of the case. And so at a minimum, it makes them look worse. And even worse, it makes it look like they are possibly damaging the books, and or undoing pressing, which is effectively the same as damaging them. And so it's possibly adding new spine ticks, it's undoing pressing, making books look worse. And we'll get into kind of the response a little bit later from CGC on this. But at first they were allowing people to send the books back in, get them recased, try to like press them or resolve this, whatever it was. And not so much the case anymore with these. But next up, we had in June, Giant Size X-Men number 1, 9.9 sells for $170,000. Now, I felt like this was a really weak sale. And it's possible that was because all of us were talking about this 9.9 so much, and just how everything seemed kind of questionable, that maybe that might have hurt it. I don't know if that actually hurt the sale or not. I feel like people think we have a little more impact on this stuff than we actually do. But there had been a lot of people that said that they were going to pay upwards of like 300,000, and then that did not happen. And so 170,000, which is still the record ever for a Giant Size X-Men 1. 9.8s during the comic boom were going around 75,000. 9.8s right now. I mean, this $36,000 sale that just happened was big. They've been going down around like 25. That was a White Pages. Maybe it had something to do with it. But I mean, still, this book sold for like 5 times what 9.8s have been going for otherwise. And so it is a big sale. I mean, it's a significant sale, and just shows that, I mean, even with all that talk about it and everything, like 9.9 still fetch a huge premium. And this is why there's so much interest in that grade. And we can even go over and check out that book there, so we can see the sale. You can see here's that 9.9 sold for 170,000, 42 bids on June 28th. There's that book. But yeah, so that was, kind of the big 9.9 situation. I'm still tracking what's going on with 9.9s. I mean, to me, 9.9s aren't really that big of a deal to me. I think they're more of a curiosity. I think it's wild what the premiums are that they get, because I mean, really, from probably about 6 inches away, 12 inches away, you can't tell the difference between a 9.9 and a 9.8. And they go for anywhere from, in this case, 5 times as much to, we've seen as much as 60 times. I think even 80, 80 was maybe the 10.0. Like 80 times as much for a 10.0, but like 60 times as much for a 9.9. Most of the time I see it around 20 times as much. And I mean, they're basically the same as a 9.8. And if you cracked them and resubmitted, your likelihood of keeping that 9.9 is very low, in my opinion. And so it's just a huge premium paid just for that, that little number up in the corner that doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't really mean a lot. But hey, got the money to spend on it, you're welcome to spend the money on it. So then the next thing, July of this year, and there had been rumors about this going on a little before this, but PSA officially announces that they are going to be getting into comic book grading. They're going to be grading comics starting in 2025. We've heard possibly accepting submissions in maybe December of this year. So I like PSA cards. So I'm a big PSA card fan. That's all I buy when I'm buying cards now. I have a couple Beckett's, because this is the whole thing when it comes to labels. People talk about labels, which label is better, all this kind of stuff. The first few cards I bought were Beckett. And it was because I liked the Beckett label the most. I was like, they have the best label. I'm going to buy, that's the card I'm going to buy. And then you just realize, like, Beckett's harder to sell. They don't generally sell for as much. And so then I was just like, I'm not buying that anymore. I'm going to buy PSA. It's the same thing with CGC and comics. CGC comics sell for a premium. They are easier to sell. There's more demand for them. There's more people that get them graded. It's the same thing with PSA and cards. And so, I just bought a PSA card very recently. So here's a Pokemon card I picked up. This is one of these special illustration rares from Twilight Masquerade. And I like the trainers, and this is one of special illustration rares, the new big thing with Pokemon cards. And so I bought a PSA, and for moderns, I always buy PSA 10. It's the same as CGC 9.8 for comics, but for basically for modern Pokemon cards, always PSA 10. That's the only thing I'll buy, because that's what other people want as well. So if I did decide that I wanted to sell it, I know I can easily sell it. And I follow a number of Pokemon channels, where people buy and sell. And some of them I watch, people will bring CGC cards to them or Beckett cards to them. And they're just like, no, I don't want it.
No, I don't do CGC, bro. CGC does not sell.
I only want PSA. Now, Beckett Black labels are exceptions. They'll typically buy a Beckett Black label. That's kind of the one big exception for cards. But generally, it's PSA or nothing. Now, it's not 100% of that case, but it's the same situation you see with CGC and comics. It's just the demand is there. And so that's what sellers want to buy, and that's what they want to sell. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy with it. But we've got these PSA, comic slabs here. And I'll give my take on it. I'm fine with the PSA labels on cards. I don't feel like it transfers well to a comic. The expanded size of it, to me, it doesn't look great. It's the same way I felt with CGC cards, where when they first started using the labels that look like they're comic labels, I hated them. I didn't feel like that one shrunk well. They've changed their label now. I think the label looks a lot better on the CGC cards now, but there's still not a lot of demand for them. But I feel kind of the opposite way here with PSA and this. My opinion on PSA with grading comics is I'm always happy to see more competition out there. Doesn't mean I'm sending books to them. That's just going to be the facts of it. I'm not going to necessarily be sending books to them right off the bat. If it ends up being that there's tons of demand for them, they're selling for just as much as CGC, fine. I'll send books to them, but I'm not going to throw my money into a hole, where then there's no demand for those books ultimately. So I will play the wait and see game. That is my take on PSA getting into comics. But more competition is always good. We've had plenty of drama and situations with CGC over the last year, few years, and having competition helps pull that stuff into check. But right now I'm not sending anything into CGC because of the bending that was going on and all that. But when I feel like that's been resolved, that's where I'm going back to. It's just, you can call me a CGC shill or whatever you want. I'm sure I'll get that in the comments, but I am running a business, a comic buying and selling business. And if that's what people want to buy, that's what I'm going to use. Like I said, I got the raw books back up there too. I like raw books just as well. But for grading, especially for expensive books, a lot of times, grading is beneficial to help with those sales, to make people feel confident in what they're getting. And right now CGC is king, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with PSA. Regardless, it's going to take years. I mean, CGC has a huge lead on them. There's way more books out there. I mean, I don't know if that's even something that can be made up, but PSA, I feel like, has a better backing behind them than CBCS. It never feels like Beckett is really backing CBCS all that much, but we'll find out. All right. So then I just wanted to point this one out because I felt like this was one of the best little advertisements, or kind of like, I mean, I'll call it advertisement, that has been done in comics. This was CBCS making fun of the bending comics from CGC, where they put out this video, and I was just like, I talked about this one when they put it out. I was just dying laughing when they made this video where they basically pressed a banana into one of the cases. And I mean, I'll always keep showing it. I feel like they did a great job with it. I feel like they're stretching a little too long now. They've done a couple other videos now too. And they should just kind of like stick with this one, but still, I thought this one was great. And so I just want to always point that one out, because right after this, we had CGC give their response right here on September 6th to the whole Bendgate situation, which the short of it is they said, yes, the curve is there, but it doesn't damage the comics. So we're not going to allow you to send them back as a mechanical, like for a free reholdering. Slight bend is allowed. It can't damage them in the cases. Well, like, nobody likes this response. Nobody likes this response. But as many have pointed out, they didn't really have much of another choice. If they said they were damaging the books, the likelihood of some type of huge lawsuit, I mean, the expenses could be just unbearable for the company. I mean, who knows? Like, if that happened, if they went out and said like, oh yeah, we're actually damaging these. I mean, what I looked at CGCdata.com just to show you how many books have been graded in the last 2 months. There were approximately 143,000 in just the last 2 months. Since this whole thing kicked off that in May 14th, that would put this up to about 280,000, give or take, books, almost 250,000 books. Now, a lot of the bending ones seem like they're more with the moderns, but we did see it, in some of the posts in there. We saw there was one post where there was a Golden Age book, a Matt Baker Golden Age book, that it was also being bent. So it's not just the moderns. And so even if it was only 10% of that, that's 28,000 books. I mean, this is a huge amount of books. I don't know if people realize how many books CGC grades. And this was just in the last 4 months. It would have been about, 280,000, give or take. And so that's why I feel like that's probably why they made the statement that they did, just so they don't bury themselves. But obviously nobody likes this statement. I mean, I think a lot of us think that it's at least making them look worse. And from other follow-up videos I've seen from some other people, it does seem like there is legitimately some damage that's being done. And at best, it's undoing pressing that people have done. And, when I send books in to get pressed and graded, if I'm sending in a submission of like 50 or 75 books, I'm spending thousands of dollars on pressing. Like, I don't want to then have that all undone by being put in the case. So, I mean, it's not just the grading fees and the damage. It's like you're also then throwing that pressing money out the door. So there's all kinds of situations there. And I mean, my opinion on the whole Bendgate, Bananagate thing, prior to this, I felt like the worst thing that CGC had done in the last few years was when they removed the notes off the label. And the reason I think that I say that was the worst was because that was clearly something that was not meant to be good for collectors or the hobby. It was like, that was something that was done probably at the prodding of some like big sellers or that kind of thing, to make it easier to sell books. Like that was not for the benefit of anybody but sellers. This one is probably worse. This is probably the worst thing. This whole Bendgate situation is the worst thing that CGC has done since I've been back in comics. Now, I haven't been in comics as long as a lot of other people. I collected back in the 80s and 90s. I got back into reading comics around 2010. And then I got back into collecting comics around like 2018 to 2019. And so it's been like 5 or 6 years I've been back into it. And in that time frame, to me, this is the worst thing I've seen CGC do, because it does seem like they are, I mean, there's some damage being done to these comics in there, whether they say it or not. Because the problem, in my opinion, with their stance here, where they're saying like it only can bend so much inside the case so it can't apply damage, that's if there was 0 flaws in the book. But because there are almost no books that have 0 flaws on them, they have weak spots. They have, you know, like a spine tick or whatever that's a weak point, and that can get flexed earlier than what they're claiming, you know, like with less of a bend than what they're claiming is required to cause a spine tick. And so that's where I feel like that's the problem here. That's the incorrect information that's being applied here. That yes, if it was a perfect book with 0 spine ticks, maybe what they're saying is correct. It would still flex the paper, so it wouldn't look as good. But because there are almost always going to be spine ticks on a book, that is going to mean that the book is going to flex at those spine ticks, which is what we've seen. We've seen in all these pictures that are out there. So that's, you know, that's my take. I do think that this is the, you know, after all the time kind of like looking at this and everything, I think this is probably the worst thing that CGC has done in the last 5 years. So I do hope that they ultimately make some change that makes it so this goes away. I don't really buy the explanation in the story. Hopefully they're doing something else as well, but we'll see. All right. Now for the most recent situation that's been going on. So like I said, for more details, you can go check out Mickey's channel. He interviewed Paul Lesko, the hobby lawyer, as well. We got a little more information there. We've got CBCS, or Beckett Collectibles, suing Mark Wilson and Wes Steffen, who were employees at CBCS. Now, Mark Wilson is the new head grader, or I believe that's his title, but for PSA for comics. That's why this brings kind of all this together. So it is the accusation is that Mark Wilson and Wes Steffen took proprietary information from CBCS, and that they may then use that in their position at PSA. And the claim is that it's for subgrades for comics. And there's been a few other videos out there. I mean, so Dave with Comic Books and Book Investments has been making a couple videos on this because Mark Wilson is his dad. And so he's making a couple videos on this as well. I mean, I'll say I don't completely agree with his take. Now, he said it in his videos, like he is very biased in this situation. But, you know, he was saying that, you know, everybody has, or not everybody, but a lot of people have subgrades for cards. And so this isn't a big deal about subgrades for comics. My take is, or at least my understanding, because like I said, I collect some cards too. And from watching different Pokemon channels and all of that, yes, other people may have subgrades, but it doesn't mean they're using the subgrades the same way. So just because you have a number there with some type of description on how you graded that, it doesn't mean you're using that in the same way, you're applying it the same way to reach the final grade. From at least from what I understand, CBCS or Beckett, in that case with subgrades for their cards, they do not tell people how they apply those grades to result in the final grade. Now you can infer what they're doing, but they don't have anything that, and you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but they don't have anything that officially lays out how they do that. And so that's where you can claim that whatever their process is proprietary. That's the take there. Now with comics, nobody has done subgrades for comics yet. There isn't that I'm aware of. There may be some company out there that does it, but at least none of the big companies put subgrades on comics. Now you could kind of claim that that graders notes are kind of like subgrades, but they're not really. But what I would put as subgrades is basically like this. So this is ETA. If you're not familiar like with ETA Nick, I've talked about his little grading cheat sheet. This is effectively how subgrades would probably be applied for comics, where you have, you know, maybe your subcategories are creases, tears, stains, interior damage, or maybe like page quality and then cover damage. And so you've got things like a crease. If you have a 1/16 inch crease, is 9.6 max, 1/4 inch crease, 9.4 max. So that would be like the subgrade. Like if you could have, if there's only one crease on the book and there's a bunch of spine ticks, like for creases, maybe you have a 9.8, but for spine ticks, you have an 8.0. And so then that is a limiting flaw. So now your grade is the 8.0, something like that. And that's how that would get applied to get the final grade. I can't say exactly. That's where you get to whatever they worked out on their side to generate that final grade based on some combination of these things. But this is how I could potentially see subgrades work, where you'd have creases, tears, and so if you have like a 1-inch tear, like that one's a 7. If you have a 1/4-inch crease, that's a 9.4. And it kind of like, it would give you a picture of what the different types of flaws are on that book. I mean, personally, I don't see a big future for subgrades on comics. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Like it's one of those things where more information is good for collectors when they're wanting to buy something, but more information is also bad for sellers. So just like how CGC removed those label notes from their labels for comics, this is basically doing the opposite. This is adding way more label notes. And so I could see this as something that sellers wouldn't want to have this option. And so, for example, like with Beckett, you have the option of having subgrades included or not. CGC, when they used to do subgrades, they don't anymore. But when they used to do subgrades, you had the option to include the subgrades or not. And so I could see that as something like people just wouldn't use it. Like it maybe somebody who's just putting it to collect, like as their PC book, they might, but somebody looking to sell probably would not use that option. And then it becomes this thing that you have to maintain, that maybe only 5% or 10% or less of the submitters are using. And so now it becomes a hassle to deal with. And so I don't think there's likely a big future for subgrades in comics, but I could be wrong. But this is kind of how I would see it probably playing out, would be something like how ETA Nick's grading cheat sheet, lays out these different types of flaws. And like, so it's basically defining limiting flaws for books. But yeah, that's my take on it. I mean, if you want to go check out more details on this lawsuit, you've got Paul Lesko, his Twitter or X handle, and he's got the stories on that, or check out Mickey's channel for the videos that he did on this. Now, I don't really know what's going to come from all of this. I mean, I don't know if we're going to get any, I bet it's going to be something that settles outside regardless, just like with the CGC lawsuit stuff. Like, who wants to really go through all the hassle and pay lawyers and put all your information out there? I mean, for all we know, that might result in, their standard being publicized, which they don't want. So who knows? But I mean, it's been a drama-filled year with comic book grading. So I mean, it's crazy when you look at all this, you go back and you're like, this was all just in like 12 months. Like, you go to the new labels happened about 12 months ago. And I mean, the whole CGC scam thing, like this was basically this year. This was right at the end of December, or December 16th, 2023. So it hasn't even been 12 months since that. Nobody even talks about it anymore. But all kinds of drama going on in comic book grading over the last 12 months. Hopefully this helped get you, up to date on everything that's going on. My little bits of my takes on each of the areas. But if you'd like to see more content like this, hit the like button, subscribe button, notification bell, and I'll see you on the next one.